It is a crowded field, and it feels like a crowded room right now. To be fair, we will ask people to try to limit answers to 2 minutes. This is not a debate. This is really just getting an idea of who you all are, who each of you are, and ideas on different policies. So we are going to limit this until 3 o'clock. Yeah, we'll limit until 3.
Sounds good.
So, Aaron, as the organizer, Rook, as the organizer, you want to lead us off?
Sure. So I think kind of last time we started off asking folks kind of how the campaign's been going so far, kind of what you've been hearing on the street that are concerns for people in Bend. So if we want to just start off on the left there with Richard, do you want to go first?
They want to know what kind of stuff you've been hearing about in Bend that you want to fix, that people are concerned about.
Oh yeah, they need to I'd like to have a ADA refixed, roundabouts for COC campus, and they need to refix the more sidewalks for the city of Barron, and also we need to have more projects for the city of Barron. And I got my speech with me. You guys want to hear him?
I don't think we have time for the speech. Is there any projects you want to name that you like, that you support? We can do the speech later, maybe. Any projects that you want to name?
Yeah.
Like you support Parks and Rec, right?
Because I do support support Ability Tree, and I do support City of Bend, and I do support Bend Parks and Rec District. I used to be advisory board for them, and then I used to be a volunteer to working with them, and then I am supporting with my candidates, and I have to get along with my candidates, and I need to respect for my politicians. And because I have my my campaign team is helping me to support me, because I got Ability Tree staff members to support me, and I got Bend Parks and Rec District staff to support.
Is that time, or?
That's good. That's all.
Okay, yeah, I think that's
2
a
minutes.
good answer to the question.
As far as how the campaign's going,
And what you're hearing.
Yeah, and what we're hearing, sure. So the campaign has been fun thus far. We had our Slower Safer Bend event last week. That was fun. Some of the distinctions in the other races were starting to come out, which is interesting to hear kind of what people are concerned about there. So yeah, I'm new to this whole campaigning, building a campaign, and I just had to work really diligently to make sure I make the time for it. But it is exciting. And what I would say, of the things I hear about the most, by far, amongst people that are, I'd say 50 and younger, and especially 40 and younger, is the affordability of housing. And rents are very, very steep right now. and a lot of people are getting rent hiked either out of their place or certainly stretching their abilities to be here. And hopefully be upwardly mobile in their careers, save for retirement, put their kids in college someday, put snow tires on a car. That for so many people, that demographic, which is most of us, that's none too easy to do. So to the extent that through public policy we can affect the price of housing, that's something I hear a lot of people pushing on. I hear a lot of...
Can I pause you real fast? Was that the issue that first got attracted you to the race or inspired you to be in the race, or what first did that? And
Yeah, right. So to be perfectly honest with you, that was absolutely probably the biggest reason. And so I would point to, I have a sister who's a young professional. She was working in the marketing industry in one of our local firms downtown. She makes above the median wage in Bend by probably 20%. She and a huge number of the young people that are single, young professionals, are not able to make it in Bend. Either find a place to rent, and then if they can find a place to rent, they oftentimes can't afford it. Last winter, there was at the Volcanic Theater Pub, there was a meeting, and we were talking about growth in general and urban growth pattern issues along those lines. And I got up and I had something to say. And a week later, I was at the bank branch, and a young woman came up from behind me and grabbed my arm. And she says, "Did I see you speak at that event?" And what I spoke to was these issues specifically. And she said, "What you said really spoke to me because I'm a single young woman making it in the banking industry, and I have to share a house with 3 other young women to make it work to be in Bend, Oregon." So I'm looking to make Bend a town that works for our larger range and demographic. Currently it works really good if you have a lot of disposable income and you have, all those built-in advantages that come with that. But for those of us that need to work at or around the median wage or something close to it, it's none too easy. So if in our lifetimes we can end the poverty with a view, I'm all for it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I've only seen it get worse, so.
Yeah, right? Poverty with a view.
Less for you, more poverty.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, exactly. So, yeah, my turn?
Go ahead.
Yes.
Okay, I echo Casey's sentiment that it's been really fun and exciting and challenging. It's been a really great learning experience so far. This is my first foray into any sort of campaigning, so every day is a learning experience, and I really am loving it. But it's taking a ton of time. As far as issues that are of importance, definitely the affordability is a major concern. But I would say it's not just affordable housing, but just affordable Bend. So that goes beyond just paying rent, but also the cost of utilities and the cost of transportation and the cost of just everything in Central Oregon. The vacation rental piece is obviously something that is really a concern to a lot of people. I've had tons of people talk to me about that. The siting of the OSU Cascades campus has been a huge thing. The UGB, the urban growth boundary, and the expansion and what that's going to mean for our community. There are so many issues.
can I jump in then and
Yeah.
talk a little bit about what do you think the role of City Council for the Airbnb for vacation rentals is or should be? Or do you have a stance on it already?
Well, I do think that the city needs to step up and take more of a role, play more of a role. I think this whole rubber stamping applications that come in the door without any sort of inspections or, clarification as to who's doing what, where, and when, I don't think that that's necessarily acceptable. I mean, I'm all for private property rights, and I think that people should be able to, on some level, do certain things with their homes, but at the end of the day, it's just not okay to turn entire neighborhoods into commercial entities. Like, I think that that goes beyond the spirit of, I think, the policy. So from what I understand from sitting through the city council meeting last, I guess it was 2 weeks ago, the city has the option of essentially enforcing it through almost a stricter code that's already on the books, which would be more like the bed and breakfast process, which is not so much just a rubber stamp, but more involves inspections and an annual relicensing process. And I think at the bare minimum right now, that would be a good way to start. And then I also think that going forward, it might make sense to start looking at, like they've already looked at the way that other communities have handled it with density over a specific area. And I think that is something that's worth looking into, but my understanding is that takes a long time to change the code. But I do think that that's something that the city should consider only because going back to Casey's really good points about affordability, I mean, nobody wants to see families kicked out of homes so that they can become vacation rentals for people. I mean, I don't think, especially when there is, you know, possibly a housing shortage at this point in time. I mean, that just, I mean, reading articles that you guys have written in The Source and talking to people, I mean, it's like heartbreaking to hear about people literally getting booted out of their homes and having no place to go, and then that turning over into a vacation rental. And while I, you know, as a homeowner, I think that there's some value to being able to run a vacation rental, I just think there needs to be more sort of enforcement and just regulation, just so that we have so that we can balance it. It needs to be a balancing act, like everything. I mean, I don't think it can be all one way or all the other, but I think that the city needs to step up and take a stronger role. So, yes.
Same question, I assume. There's two major issues I'm dealing with on the street. First, I want to say that I do appreciate being invited here. As a quick caveat, before I approach these two issues, I want to let you know that I'm not here to seek the Source's endorsement. For me, this is not an endorsement interview. So if you choose me to endorse me, you can leave that place blank and we'll all just kind of wink and no.
Rhonda, what would we wink and know about?
Whatever.
Okay.
My two issues are affordability and voter disenfranchisement. I will speak very quickly to the affordability issue because we've covered it pretty well already. The thing is, we're in a unique moment right now between last city council meeting and tonight. There have been issues raised. As one, the major one being is, are we actually allowing these vacation rentals to exist per code as written? So to really have any really strong opinions about what should happen, I'd like to take a look and see what they decide is already in writing. I find it very interesting that other neighborhoods, including Portland, won't even allow vacation rentals. We have to decide what we want Bend to look like and what we want Bend to be. The larger issue that is at the source here are the question that's been asked many times, and I tried to answer it when I spoke to City Council with my 3 minutes last Wednesday, 2 Wednesdays ago, was where are my neighbors going? Nobody wanted to answer that question. I said that dreaded H word to everyone who's aghast, and I heard nothing but crickets. Nobody wants to take responsibility that Bend creates millionaires and creates homeless within the infrastructure, economic infrastructure we have today. If we want to pretend that we have property rights here in this town without talking about property responsibilities, then I'm going to start to introduce you to every single homeless people that I'm meeting while I'm out there that are telling me they were rent hiked out, and we won't have to ask that question anymore. Where are my neighbors? Because they're on the street, and they've left our city. They've gone to Portland and to elsewhere, and our city is not better for having them gone. The other issue I'll speak briefly about is voter disenfranchisement. And I made a joke about it earlier, whether or not we we're going to be charged here to come. And I've been asked to be, as a candidate, be a part of another event, which I refuse to be part of, hosted by another organization, because they're charging voters to come. And I don't see how that brings our community together. I see that dividing our community. So I'm going to ask my other fellow candidates not to show up at these events where they are charging voters. Thank you.
Just want to go. So, what? We're gonna start with. We'll start with you, Casey, on this one. I mean, you guys obviously have all spoken about affordability, homelessness, and seem to be this race seems to be maybe focused on one issue potentially. Let's jump into some of the other things that you might have to deal with. Budget is a big one. I'm not sure, hopefully you guys are familiar with what the city's budget is to some extent. Let's say you guys were $250,000 came down the pipe. How would you spend it?
If another $250,000 came down the pike in terms of, that probably would come from.
Or would you earmark it for the general fund? I mean.
So if $250,000 came down and and I'm not trying to be argumentative or too
Yeah.
theoretical here, but we're talking about property tax revenue, and I mean, we're $250,000 over our assessment, or our estimate, just $250,000.
That's just,
Somebody
we're in
just
a
drops it.
fictitious world. I didn't think
A
that.
fairy drops
I didn't think the intake in, I was just, you guys are just going,
Okay.
they outpour on
You
it.
get a gift, basically.
Yes.
Okay.
So one of the big ones that has to jump out at me is street maintenance. Only because, well, not only because, but one of the biggest reasons is it's one of the most significant assets we have in the community. And so our water system's $1 billion asset, our wastewater collection and treatment system's $1 billion asset, and our streets have to be probably worth the same or more. So, and there's no enterprise fund that's dedicated solely for that. And so in terms of a potential crisis coming down the road is our inability to keep up with general maintenance. And while there are lots of pressing concerns, if you had $250,000 to throw in overlays that would keep these millions and millions of dollars worth of roads from going to the point where we have to pull all the asphalt up and rebuild and subgrade, that's a concern for me. Because if you let the streets go too far, too long, the expense of making them better or passable, if you will, is far, far greater. So I know there are a lot of pressing issues in terms of ADA access, and you know, thankfully the fire bond passed, and so hopefully they've got some money to replace the engines and hire the FTEs and the things they need. But I'd probably go to the streets.
I think that I would give a similar answer, but instead of just streets, I think I would broaden it more to just transportation in general. And I would also probably include the ADA component and look more at not just maintaining the streets, but also how can we potentially offer alternatives to people other than just getting in their cars. And I think that everybody makes really short trips mostly in this town, 1 to 3 miles, maybe 5 miles max, and we almost all get in our cars to do it, and I'm guilty of this as well. And I've lived in other communities where it's a lot easier to get on your bike because there are dedicated, almost dedicated just byways that are bicycle byways. You know, having lived in Eugene and Gainesville, Florida, and other places, I've seen how this can work and really help keep people sort of move people in a different direction. So I agree with Casey that transportation and streets are a huge issue, but I would probably, rather than dedicating it specifically to maintenance of roads, I would like to see sort of a little bit of out of the box thinking and trying to think of how we can look at transportation as a whole, and also taking into consideration, you know, a lot of the ADA compliance, which we are horribly behind on as a city right now, and just there's a lot of obstacles. My understanding is there's a lot of obstacles to folks who have some challenges, and I think those would be obstacles for kids as well, and like people who want to be on bikes. So that's probably where I would want to put the money. But I also think the fire and safety and ambulance thing, the bond thing is great, but on a 5 year cycle, it makes me a little nervous. So
We're only talking about $250,000.
I know it's true. I know. I'm optimistic.
You know, I'm not gonna be held to $250,000 because I believe we're gonna have a lot more than $250,000 coming down the pike here. I believe in the growth that's coming. I believe that I believe in growth in more than just real estate prosperity, but I am going to focus on that real estate value that's driving so much here and bringing so many people here to Bend and so much enterprise. Everything to do with transportation, we need to fulfill the obligation for the ADA, obviously. We need to make bike access not only accessible, but maybe even a little sexy. I mean, we went to make people want to, and I say that kind of kidding, but not, because I hear it and it makes me a little mad every time I hear it, because my friends say a lot that Bend is bike friendly, and it's not. I'm out there, I've been out there 4 years, and I can tell you it's not. And me saying that isn't going to inspire anybody to get out on their bike and get out there. So we have to do something regarding not just infrastructure, which costs money, but also education, which I guess sometimes also costs money. But sewer infrastructure, actual street infrastructure, but redesigned. I have some ideas about making some of our streets thinner and bringing some more one-way streets and some more sleek design that requires less petroleum products in the long term. We must, and this is the largest in the central part of my conversation every single day, we cannot grow, we cannot mature as a city, we cannot think about bringing a college here until we have a fully funded, self-funded transportation district with a 24-hour bus system that serves the entire city. We cannot accept any less. We cannot expect that we can grow or be mature without putting the cart behind the horse. That's how it's been done.
So Richard, if $250,000 or $250,000 is given to Bend, what do you think we should spend the money on?
Like, yeah, we need to spend like, say 60 million for adaptations for independence.
Or what again for independence?
Yeah, we need to have more have disabilities to have more to live social skills.
Oh, for the disabilities to gain more social skills?
Yeah.
To work and so they can work more?
And then they need to work more because they need to have, because I am not dropping out. I am not resigning, and I am not gonna lose, because I do want to stay on for city council candidate this year, because I want to make it happen, because I do want to make a difference for City of Bend and United States of America, to have the city council to help me to get me on that board.
Alright, so mostly you'd spend it on disability stuff for ADA?
Yeah.
Okay. That's great.
So the Mirror Pond issue has been a perpetual question. I'm sure it comes up constantly. And you know, without debating the merits of what we would do, how do you, one, what does it mean to have an issue like that in front of council for as long as it's been in front of council, and how do we prevent in the future issues like this from getting stuck and tumbling forward without resolution?
I would love to advocate more public participation. I mean, I almost feel like this is an issue where the voters should decide what should happen. I think we can kick around ideas till we're blue in the face, but it's such a divisive issue that I really do think that getting the citizens of Bend to decide would be almost the best way to move forward. And I think that the council then, and the job of the council would be to come up with, you know, maybe not just one or two alternatives, but a suite of different options, and really do a cost-benefit analysis, not just for, you know, dollars and cents, but sort of taking into consideration a whole host of, you know, the social values as well as ecological values, and really sort of put it to the voters and let them decide what should happen, instead of arguing till we're blue in the face and not moving forward. So.
What do you think is the root cause of, I mean, going to the voters? You know, why do you think they're not going to the voters, and why do you think they need to go to the voters?
Well, I don't understand why they're not, actually. That's a question. I mean, and maybe that's my being a little green in terms of this whole process. But it sort of makes me scratch my head as to why we're not really letting the voters decide. But the second part of your question was what was the major sticking point?
Yeah, why is it that this issue can't be resolved through the city council?
I think that a lot of it has to do with just values. I mean, a lot of these issues have to do with values, but this in particular, I mean, Mirror Pond is an icon in the city of Bend. I mean, it's a historic piece of our community, and so no matter who you are, I think, you know, if you've been here for any length of time, you are attached to that. Just like, you know, we get attached to all sorts of things, but I think that it's sometimes hard to look beyond those attachments. But I think that when you really hang like a dollar figure on it and you really say like, okay, so you're attached to this and this is how much potentially that attachment is going to cost us as a community going forward, I think that that's when you might be able to get people to sort of think long and hard about it. But I don't know that there have been really, in my discussions with other folks who are like, you know, very much, they want to keep the pond, they don't feel like they've seen real dollar figures as to what it's going to cost to maintain that dam and to dredge. I mean, they don't really understand why it's an issue. So.
I love Mirror Pond. I love talking about Mirror Pond. Every 2 years, just talk about Mirror Pond. I'm gonna spot a smiley face button. Mirror Pond. I literally go to Mirror Pond Plaza and just sit there on my bicycle and gaze at it sometimes for a half hour, honestly. And but I also know that I'm gonna love that river when it's a river. Whether it's a hybrid of what we have now, I really don't care, but I will just answer the question that hasn't been asked yet. I will not vote to spend any money to repair or save that dam. Nature wants it down, it's taking it down as we speak. I'm gonna let it. If we want to spend money or get grant money or make that happen in a smart way, then we should do so. The reason why we're not having the conversation in this community, because as much as I love our present city council, they're invested in a certain segment of this community and they serve them, and when you take a look at that group, you say that a certain segment of our community is represented by those 7 people, and that's why I'm running again, because I represent the largest unrepresented group soon to be represented on council, and they have a completely different opinion, and it doesn't behoove our city council to ask that group or me representing those people. We want our river back, and so did Ben.
What do you think we should do with Mirror Pond, Richard? Take the dam out or keep it the same?
I would say keep the dam because we need to keep it. We need to keep it open, and we need to vote. We need to have a city band need to vote on dam for yes.
So keep the dam and then keep Mirror Pond as it is.
Because I like to keep a dam like where it is, because why? Because I want to make it happen. I want to see. I do want have more action of that dam. Because I like to see have the whole city, the whole state, around the United States, they need to refix the dam.
Good.
To your point about how the council works through these issues, I would contrast it to, say, the Southern River Crossing of 12 or 13 years ago. And the Southern River Crossing was something that was put to the voters because the council, at that time, the majority of the council didn't want to move forward on it. And I think when you can put an issue to the voters that's as clean and black and white as the Southern River Crossing was, it was either, do we move ahead with this portion of our transportation plan or do we not? We've already acquisitioned the property. Some of the design, I believe, is already done. Are we going to have a Southern River Crossing or not? There were no water rights. Pacific Power wasn't a player. The Edenda Parks District issue. Mr. Smith and Mr. Taylor hadn't already bought the ground up from underneath the crossing.
Right.
That was so clean. And I think in terms of when a direct democracy, it has its best effect is on something that's that straightforward. To contrast that, it's really apples and oranges, because Mirror Pond is enormously complex in the history. What you do with those water rights that are, I think that's one of the biggest holdups is those water rights are tied specifically to the generation of hydroelectricity. So you have to go all the way down that route. If you're going to, not back the dam up, or if you're going to continue to back the river up, what's going to happen there and what kind of legal challenges will you face? you have a private player in Pacific Power, and they don't really want to negotiate with an entire city. They want to negotiate with a representative or two in good faith, and it's difficult. Our organization has dealt with the city in the past, and it's hard enough getting something done with one or two people from a public organization, let alone trying to manage a message and get this, So that's how, and should it be?
So, am I hearing that you're saying that the process is that you're okay with the process?
I am, and the reason why is because I realize it's taken a long time, but in terms of the order of magnitude of getting it right, it's well worth taking our time. As opposed to, say, the surface water project, where there was a federal mandate that had been on the books since 1996, and we absolutely were going to be under court order at some point if we didn't meet our filtration needs or our treatment needs, such as it were. That's a pressing issue, and whereas nothing about Mirror Pond is necessarily pressing. The bridge isn't going to have a catastrophic come apart. If it does poke a hole, the water drops down, and no one's going to. There's no public health and safety issue there. So if it takes us a couple years to go down all these avenues to figure out what the real true cost is going to be of maintaining whatever it is we come to maintain, and what we do with those water rights, and what we do with the ground around the pond and that whole thing, I think it's well worth taking our time, and I'm not so frustrated by it I want to rush into a bad decision.
If it takes another decade, would you be okay with that?
I'd rather not, but to the.
I'm trying to gauge how much you feel like. I mean, it's been easily 10 years.
Yeah.
And maybe that's true, that it is that valuable. Would another 10 years raise concerns, or what's the scope?
I can't imagine we wouldn't figure out what we needed to figure out after the negotiations of Pacific Power come to some sort of end within another year to 18 months. So I'm going to say in 3 to 5 years tops. I would be frustrated if it went beyond 5, but it sure wouldn't bother me if we took 3 to 5 years or 2 to 5 or whatever it ended up being to make sure we really got it right. Because there's long-term costs associated with keeping that thing the way it is, and how are we going to fund those, and then the fact that Todd and Bill bought the ground, that's quite a complication. And it's enormously complicated, and that's why I'm reluctant to just put it out there to a simple up or down. It's not really that easy.
And I wouldn't advocate that without homework. Lots and lots of homework with good options on the table.
What I will do is I will advocate a time clock, 4-year time clock. We've got dredging issues that we've been putting off for years. I think we shouldn't forget that.
I'll certainly come find all of you. And we'll see where we're at. Aaron, did you?
Yeah, so city council is kind of like a team. Everybody brings something different to the table. I'd like to hear what you all think. It's kind of the unique either work style, quality, personal experience that you bring to council that's not currently being represented.
That's my question. I do believe that is one of my largest attributes, pairing with one of the largest needs on our council. I don't believe that enough of our community is represented on that council in so many issues.
Can you be specific?
Just
like what do you bring that's not there right now specifically? Who do you represent, or?
I see city council representing a certain in-the-box thinking. And I'm not being critical about the lack of creativity. There are smart people on that council. I look forward to working with those smart people. But I live outside the box. I'm a bicyclist commuter. I have been for 4 years, so I do not go out my front door and into a car door every time I'm going somewhere. I see the unique perspective. I've learned myself a new perspective as a non-driving driver, because I see how I used to be when I take a look at cars speeding up to a red light, when I see people. I think a quarter to a third of the people out there are still at any one time texting or on their phone. That mentality, that awareness of our streets is not on city council. As a commuter, also I am literally spending a good 2/3 of my day on the street, mixing with people from all segments of our community. That ranges from millionaires to homeless. And I feel like I have a real sense of what's going on in town. And again, supports my idea about, I love talking about Marathon, our access to the feelings of people, very, very strong feelings of people in this town who want their river back and don't want to pay to keep a vision that's of a Bend that's antiquated.
That's Rhonda.
Richard?
Do you remember the question?
Well, I have to say, yeah, we cannot text and drive, and we cannot text by walking on the streets, and we cannot talking to cell phones, not like we going to, because the traffic is way too busy, because they need to stay focused, they need to stay on, or they need to stop what they're doing to respect other people too, because they need to, I will, for me, I will be representative for city council, and I will end that, and I will support that area.
Richard, I also want to ask a question. Is there somebody on city council you're most excited about working with? Is there one of the council members or the mayor that you feel like you'd work best with?
That is because I do support my campaign team.
But on city council, is there anybody that you respect the most, or you want to work with, like the mayor or any other people on city council?
Well, I like to say I like to work with John Gestapo, and I like to work with Jeff Buckley, because I like to have them to help me to be part of my campaign team. Because why I'm doing this, because for me, myself, need to respect, to get along with the candidates as we for that question that you just mentioned. Because I really want to take that more action. I like to have a community and economy stay together like that.
Thank you.
What I would think that I could potentially bring is some historical knowledge for sure, having grown up here, but not only just having grown up here, our family business has been in the water utility industry. So we worked closely for years, and sometimes not so friendly and not so closely with the old guys, the people that made the decisions that got us in the infrastructure messes we're in today, or the lack thereof, I should say, the decisions. So between that experience and having spent the last 4 years on 3 separate city council appointed committees, I bring a tremendous amount of working knowledge and context to the issues we face today as we try and get through the rest of these infrastructure projects. I think that's one. Secondly, coming from the part of town that we hail from in southeast and southwest Bend, I work in and live in a part of the town that most of the people, in terms of the power, resides in Bend and downtown on the west side. And for those of us that don't live in downtown or the west side, we need representation from people who see some of the practical effects of the public policies that we've placed on the community. And so by that, not having adjusted our urban growth boundary since 1981 is creating some real strains in the land. And one of the unique perspectives that I have is the irony of me running for council is that some of the policies that might otherwise go forward if I'm not on there really benefit me to no end in the short term. And by that I mean our water utility company is surrounded by Avion Water Company in the south and City of Bend in the north. Policies of infill only fill up our neck of the woods and create higher density and more meters and more customers. We also have some smaller land holdings in town, every bit of it being in the urban growth boundary. The longer that we don't deal with urban growth boundary issues, the more that land becomes worth. To say the least, the laws of supply and demand absolutely affect the cost of those prices of real estate. In the short term, those policies benefit us financially and personally, but in the long term, I'm seeing the practical effects of those in terms of people not being able to afford where they live. And I also see that people, they're not trying to game the system, they're simply trying to get what they can at the top of the market. So
Let me cut in on that.
Sure.
Why do you think, why do you think that the urban growth area hasn't expanded?
We tried, got 4 or 5 years ago, and that was remanded, of course. I suspect it was so darn big to start with in 1981, and it was pretty sizable given the fact that Bend is largely in it with the exception of a couple of school annexations and things of that nature. So there was a lot of ground to use up. I suspect it hadn't because the sheer nature of the size of the process, trying to get through it and the expense. And then the reason we didn't, it sounds like we overreached last time. That there was it was simply too large and the justifications simply weren't there to justify why we needed so much acreage. And so this trip around, as I have sat in on a couple of technical advisory committees, I think we're doing a better job, and I see those technical advisory committees doing a better job of saying, hey look, we can't count this particular chunk of ground as our 20-year land supply because of X, and we can't count this one, and this one's going to be affected by the North Highway realignment and things of that nature. So when you take a true look at your inventories available, you begin to see that we really have used the space up. And policies of infill, I too want to see infill occur. It's just that there's this reality gap between the cost of the land you're trying to infill on and people's ability to pay and live there. And so when the cost of land far exceeds people's ability to work and pay for it, you create a situation where so much of the part of town we're in, people aren't able to build equity in themselves and therefore their community because they just simply can't afford to buy themselves. And I'd rather live in a community where people had more skin in the game and had equity in themselves because they tend to treat their community the same way.
I'm going to add just back to the original question.
Sorry.
No, I appreciate the discussion on the UGB.
I threw you off. I was totally off.
No, I know, you derailed it. This doesn't have to become name calling, but who on council do you feel like you are either closest to or most aligned with, and who do you feel like you're going to be furthest from?
Wow. One of the fellows that I respect a lot is Victor Chudowski. And I think Victor has a grasp on the issues in a way that I've not met anyone personally that can process information the way that guy does. He's a researcher by trade. He has, I believe, that's his business, him and his wife's business called Dara Research. And I've seen him take enormously complex issues, having been on these advisory committees and for years now, and process them and get to the heart of the matter and able to determine that, hey, look, this is a values debate. This isn't about pipe size or pipe diameter, or this should have been a values debate, say the water project, for instance. Mm-hmm. So I don't know that I necessarily would align myself with Victor every time, but I sure appreciate the way he goes about making his decisions. And then in terms of somebody that, that's a really tough question. I really don't know who I would be at odds with because I'm a lover, not a fighter. So, however, I'm trying to think of an issue that I would have seen those guys vote on something. Take the water treatment. Doug, Sally, and Jim all voted against the water treatment option, and they would have preferred that we went with ultraviolet. And that's an example of I, having walked through the watershed, and I having listened as part of that Water Treatment Advisory Committee to the fact that there are forest fire models that show 30-foot flame heights and things of that nature, that thing will burn someday. It's just a matter of time. And when it does, it would render that watershed useless for years. And not just during the event, but every time we get any amount of precipitation, given the fact that a herd of elk crossing it currently trips the turbidity units. So every time, so in my mind, so I can agree, I can work with people for whom everyone's entitled to their value set, everyone's entitled to their opinion, but no one's entitled to their own set of facts. And to the extent that I will find myself with the people for whom facts and are paramount, and that value sets are therefore modified by the realities we face.
Do you need to repeat that?
Okay, the original question I think was something to do with what I would bring to the table, the council.
Right.
Yeah, okay. Just making sure I'm on that same page. I believe I would bring skills of being a mediator and a conflict, specializing in conflict resolution and collaboration. That's been a big focus of my career to date, is really learning how to bring very disparate interests together and try to get folks on the same page, and to look beyond just, you know, like we dig our heels in sometimes about the way that things need to be done, and we forget that a lot of times everyone's looking for this, we're reaching for the same goals. And so I think that my skill set would be really beneficial for that particular reason. I also think that I have skills similar to what you described, Victor, as being able to distill information into very easily understandable terms, and I think that's something that I also excel at. I as a researcher and an educator, I've spent a lot of time reading stuff that people wouldn't understand, you know, hide nor hair of, but I can make sense of that and then deliver that information to pretty broad audiences, and I think that that's an important skill for a city councilor to have. What else would I bring to the table? I think also just sort of sympathizing and understanding different perspectives. I mean, we all always, you know, they always say you can only understand if you walk a mile in someone else's shoes. And although none of us can actually ever do that, I think I'm pretty good at sort of walking next to people and trying to really understand where they're coming from. And that goes across the board for, you know, millionaires all the way to like Rondo said, homeless people. I mean, just really trying to understand what people's issues are. And I think that's because I'm a good listener. And I really do want to learn about what people are thinking and feeling and what are their concerns. So I think I would bring, you know, that sort of listening and connecting piece, you know, with the Bend citizens and bring that to the council so that I could really represent, you know, all of Bend and not just a small percentage of it. So
We have about 4 minutes left, 5 minutes left, and
I don't think Rondo.
I got part of the
we
question.
started with Rondo.
I got started.
Okay.
The other part of the question I didn't get to answer is who I would like to work with.
Yes.
Who I really like our mayor. I like that he tends to take a different path and say no a lot without paying a whole lot of mind to popularity necessarily, and yet he remains popular. He is one of the most deliberate and scientific-minded people, and I like to be as rational and considerate as he is. The rest of the council I've gotten to know over the years, as every 2 years I've run with somebody who ends up in. And I genuinely like everybody on the board, and I like my relationships with each one of them, and I like my availability for taking those relationships to the next level. And just on that, one of the things that makes me unique, just to piggyback, is that I've had 4 years of continuing from campaign to campaign, during that time maintaining and building those relationships.
So the last question, just really trying to limit it maybe to a minute, but we're going to ask, and this may be a moot point, but why you're asking for our endorsement, and why you feel like you deserve our endorsement. And I'd also just like to preface, I appreciate you guys all coming in today. I appreciate that it's a crowded room, crowded field of candidates. I also really, it's very impressive. You all have really been informed about your answers and also very civil, which is wonderful, and engaged with each other. Like it's been really nice to see.
Doesn't always happen like that.
Yeah,
We
but
all
it's-
really like each other
I don't know what you're talking
genuinely.
about.
But it's really impressive, and then finally, just thank each of you for running for office, because it's you're not doing it to. I mean, that $200 a month at the end of the
That's what I'm here for.
and it's definitely it's a lot of time commitment, and so thank you each for running for office. Then if we can just why you believe or why you want or why you should get our endorsement, and I think we'll start with Ron West and we'll start with Richard and go down the table.
So Richard, why do you think the source should basically support you? Like in 1 minute, real quick, why should they support you?
Yeah, I want Resource to support me as your city council, as the candidate of election of 2014, because I will have more education for I like to support myself, and I have to support my candidates because I have to respect, to get along for C7, C5, C6, because I have to respect them.
So you think, why do you think they should vote for you? Because you want to bring the community together? You want everybody to work together?
Because I do want have the community to vote for me. Because I like to have, I like to bring the community together.
Okay, that's great.
I think that you guys should endorse my candidacy because you full well know that the learning curve for city councilors can be steep and can be quite expensive. I don't think there should be any shortcuts to getting on city council in terms of previous involvement in these particular issues. I think also you saw me as, even though I think your editorial stance on the water project was different than my support of it, I think that you probably saw me way out there ahead in support of it when it was lonely to do so. I remember being the only person speaking in favor of that project many, many times over, and getting sideways with people who you might assume would be my traditional base of support, people like Bill Smith and Jack Holt, Alan Buckner. And it's spooky when you get out there on the other side of big issues, of people that are, powerful and well-connected. But I absolutely am independent and think independently. And while we may not always agree, I know that you'll come to respect me, and same goes the other way.
Okay, I think that potentially you should endorse me because I am passionate and enthusiastic and energetic and hardworking and a very, very quick learner. And I really do want to play a role and bring my skills, experience, and knowledge to the table to help affect some positive change in this community. And I really do want to be a voice for all of Bend. And I think that I could do a really good job, and I think I could bring a unique perspective to the council that doesn't exist currently. So that would be why.
The reason why I'm not asking for your endorsement, I just got to be contrary. I don't show up at other endorsement, so I've actually, this is kind of a sign of respect, me being here, and in contrast, directly disrespect to Ben Bolton, because they don't tend to seek facts or any other kind of support for their conclusions as they deliver them to their readers. So I'm here to just accentuate that I am the third-time candidate for this position. This is not something that I woke up half a year ago and decided I wanted to do. I woke up 4.5 years ago and decided I had to do it. So I'm going to be here every 2 years till it happens, and I want to accentuate that I'm the only nonpartisan in a nonpartisan race. And that is important because one reason why I do not spend money, I do not ask for money, is because I'm trying to prove that you can win a race without money. So that might be key to finding out where we find in our future a political system that's not based on money. So I do want to have my candidacy typified with that, and also with slow, smart growth as a flagship for everything that we do, because every little mistake we make hurts people financially, and to pretend that we don't make decisions in this city that affect people, and that somehow property rights are more important than people. We have to admit that businesses and people come to this city to benefit from each other, and so there is no clear-cut value that you get from owning your property without a lot of responsibility to your community for it.
Thank you. Really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Endorsement issue is coming out in 2 weeks.
Okay.